Hey you guys, and thank y'all for joining me today. We are officially clocked in, and y'all, family drama has just been taken way too far. It seems like these days, and today we have another case of that. So, if you aren't familiar, Tim Norman, who was the son of Miss Robbie Montgomery, and she was the lady who was on Welcome to Sweetie Pies, which was a very prominent reality show over on the OWN network. Yesterday, Tim was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his then 21-year-old nephew, Andre Montgomery. Now, Welcome to Sweetie Pies was a very popular reality show over on the OWN network that started in 2011 and it lasted for about 9 seasons. Now, Miss Robbie Montgomery, she was the owner and starter of the restaurant. She was actually a backup singer for Ike and Tina Turner in the 60s. She was an original Ikeette. And when her singing career came to an end, she opened up a restaurant where she used the family recipes that had been passed down from her mother to start her own business, her own restaurant, which she called Sweetie Pies. Sweetie Pies was a St. Louis-based soul food restaurant that eventually expanded and had multiple locations. And the show followed Miss Robbie Montgomery and her son Tim Norman and just the everyday dealings of the business and how that also mixed in with their family. And her grandson Andre Montgomery was also eventually brought onto the show as an extension. Now during this time, Tim also had his own family. He had his fiancee Janae, who he was kind of on and off with, and they also had a son. And outside of the restaurant business that he was running with his mother, Tim also was pursuing his own music career. Miss Robbie brought her grandson Andre from Texas to St. Louis to be with her in order to give him a better life. I believe it was said that Andre was having some troubles with just the community that he was around in Texas, and Robbie felt like he would have more opportunities and would be in a better living predicament if he was down in St. Louis with her. Now, Andre's father, who was Miss Robbie's son and his Uncle Tim's brother, had passed away, and his passing may have also affected Andre in a multitude of ways. But when Andre ended up coming to St. Louis to live with Robbie and, get involved with the family business, he was doing a whole lot better, and he even graduated high school. In 2015, Miss Robbie's home had been burglarized, and it was said to have been about $200,000 that was taken. There was some jewelry that was taken, and there were some other irreplaceable family items that had been taken from the home as well. And there was suspicion that Andre had to do with the robbery because of the nature of the items that had been taken. But Andre stood fast in his innocence in saying that he had nothing to do with the robbery. It was not him. He had no dealings. He didn't know what had happened in that situation. But because of the continued allegations and accusations that he had some involvement in it, he returned back to Texas to get away from the situation. Now, this is where things kind of get a little weird, because when Andre was back in Texas, Miss Robbie was texting him, asking him to come back to St. Louis. She asked him to do a polygraph test. She didn't believe that he had any dealings in the robbery, but she wanted him to take a polygraph test just to prove his innocence, just so that, she could have a clear mind and she could be sure. But I also think that his Uncle Tim was pressuring Miss Robbie to pressure Andre to come back to St. Louis to take that polygraph test. Now, as Andre and his grandmother are having these back and forth conversations, Andre is very adamant about him not wanting to come back to St. Louis. And not because he's just trying to evade the truth, coming out or trying to hide anything, But he specifically said that his Uncle Tim was making him feel very weird. He had a lot of bad vibes that he was feeling when it came to his Uncle Tim. And he actually said that he was afraid to come back because of his uncle. And at one point throughout these text messages, Andre also tells his grandmother that he doesn't even feel comfortable texting her and having this conversation through the messages because he's not sure about who she's showing these messages to. And they really did have a very close relationship, again, because Andre is the son that Ms. Robbie had lost. So Andre was kind of, like filling that void or that emptiness that his father had left in Miss Robbie's life. And eventually Andre did agree and did come back to St. Louis.
This is one of the almost reasons why I came down here, just to change my life from all this drama stuff and come down and still drama down here with him. And then I ain't did nothing to him, ain't made him mad or nothing.
Right, okay, I'm gonna talk to Tim because this is getting out.
On March 10th of 2016, Andre had made it back to St. Louis, and he was being very cooperative in the investigation that was going on into the burglary that happened at his grandmother's home. He was talking to investigators. He was like being very adamant about his innocence again. And he actually told the investigators that he felt like his Uncle Tim was the real culprit in the burglary that happened at his grandmother's home. Just 4 days after his arrival in St. Louis and him having talked and cooperated with investigators, Andre had gotten a call while he was in a studio session in the home to come outside and meet someone. Now, when Andre goes outside to meet this mystery person who gave him a call, Andre had been shot in the streets of St. Louis, and there were 2 other victims who had also been injured in this attack, but Andre was the only one who passed from his injuries. Now, initially, there weren't any suspects in this case. Nobody really had any idea of who would have probably wanted to hurt Andre or to set him up. There were really no red flags about anyone at the time, so they were really trying to put the pieces together to figure out what exactly went down to lead to Andre's death.
Yeah, I don't think Mom had been there either. We're still on the same street, basically, as my grandmother's house.
I'll use the phone, so they had to shoot him right here on this porch.
We've lost a lot of family members here on this street. Andre, as of late, and then before Andre, my father.
A short time after Andre's death, there was an episode of Welcome to Sweetie Pies that had been filmed, and Tim had took the camera people and his mother back to the place at which Andre had been shot and killed. Now, in this episode, Tim is seemingly upset. He's getting choked up about the situation as he's talking about it. It seems to be a pretty heartfelt thing, and he's just expressing how he can't believe that this had happened to his nephew. With Andre's father having been the son that Miss Robbie lost and Tim's brother that he lost, and now with Andre having lost his life as well, we can understandably see how this can be a very nerve-wracking and heartbreaking thing for the family to have been going through at this time. But just 4 years later, Tim Norman, Andre's own uncle, had been arrested and charged with the conspiracy to murder Andre and the carrying out of that murder. Now, conspiracy comes into play in this murder because there were 2 other people who were involved, Travell Hill and Terica Ellis. Now, Terica Ellis was a dancer at a strip club in St. Louis who had been having a sexual relationship with Tim Norman for multiple years since 2009. Now, she was also brought into the picture as well as Travell, and both parties pled guilty to their charges. Tim's plan to kill Andre is said to have gone back at least a year before his actual murder. Now, a year prior, Tim had taken out a $450,000 life insurance policy on Andre, where Tim Norman was the only and sole beneficiary of that life insurance policy. For Terica, her role in the situation was pretty simple. It was just to lure Andre into the street or into a position where the actual shooting would be able to be played out. So a week before his death, she found Andre at a club. They exchanged numbers, and on the day that Andre was murdered, she was the one who placed the call to him to go and meet her outside. Now, Travell Hill was the one who actually had the bigger job in this whole situation, and he had been paid to actually carry out the act of shooting and killing Andre once Terica had lured him outside. And with their roles in this situation, maybe it was due to Terica's sexual relationship with Tim, but Terica had been paid $10,000 for her role, and Travell had only been paid $5,000 for his. Like I stated earlier, once Terica and Travell were brought in and they were charged as well and they pled guilty, they both went on stand and testified against Tim. They told everything. They talked about how they were hired, what they were hired to do. Terica talked about her sexual relationship with Tim, how long it lasted. They talked about how this plan had been in the works for like at least a year. Tim had burner phones, like the whole nine, like everything that was included in his elaborate plan to kill his own nephew. Now, with Travell and Terica having pled guilty and not going to trial for their involvement in this crime, Travell was sentenced to 32 years in prison in last October, and Terica only received 3 years for her involvement. Now, there was a fourth party, Mr. Wally Yangnam, who was also sentenced to 3 years in prison, and he was involved because he helped him fraudulently apply for multiple policies, and he helped him file the claim for the insurance that had been taken out for Andre. Last year, in September of 2022, Tim had been found guilty of all charges that he was facing in relation to the murder of his nephew Andre. And yesterday, during his sentencing, he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, his mother, as most mothers would, had some things to say. I guess you could say in support of her son. She really just expressed that, you know, as any mother possibly would, she still loved her son very much. And she seems to still kind of be in denial that her son Tim had any involvement or that he could really do something like this to his own family. And she said herself that she doesn't know for sure that Tim did it. And Tim himself has not admitted to it, but he has been found guilty in a court of law. Now, welcome to Sweetie Pies ran on the OWN network for a total of 9 seasons. So from 2011 to 2018 when it came to its close. And Miss Robbie closed down her last St. Louis location of her restaurant after her son Tim had been convicted. Now, if this story is new to you, let me know what you think. But I did hear about this story a while ago, and I personally always kind of thought the uncle had, you know, robbed the home and that he was the one to have something to do with Andre's death. And a lot of people felt the same way. And others also think that Miss Robbie, a part of her does know that her son had something to do with both parts of this story. But again, as a mother and as a grandmother, it's just something that she probably just does not want to come to terms with, which is understandable. But yeah, that's all that I have for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in with me. I appreciate it so much. Don't forget to leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, share this video, do whatever it is to continue to help this page to grow. I love you guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, we are officially clocked out.